The forest revealed more than just secrets. It stripped me bare. In every way imaginable. The connection we shared was raw, unguarded. A moment where boundaries dissolved. And I found myself exposed, not just to them but to my own truth. It wasn't just physical. It was a collision of souls, a merging of everything we were and everything we feared. In that moment, I discovered what it meant to truly let go. Before we dive into this powerful story, let us know where you're tuning in from. And if you find it compelling, don't forget to hit subscribe. The forest had always been a refuge for me. Its quiet paths and ancient trees felt like an escape from the noise of the world. But lately, even the forest couldn't silence the restless hum that had settled in my chest. A feeling that something was missing, something I couldn't quite name. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the trees, dappling the path ahead of me. The air smelled of damp earth and pine, but I barely noticed it. My thoughts were elsewhere, drifting to questions I didn't have answers to. I kicked a loose stone with the toe of my boot, watching it skitter across the trail. The sound felt too loud in the stillness. I stopped at the edge of the path and leaned against an old oak tree, my fingers brushing its rough bark. What am I even looking for? I whispered aloud. The forest, as always, gave no answer. I adjusted the scarf around my neck and took a deep breath, letting the crisp air fill my lungs. There was a sense of expectancy in the silence, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. For a moment I considered turning back, heading home to the safety of routine. But something in me resisted. A pull, faint but insistent, urging me to keep going. The trail narrowed as I walked deeper into the woods, the trees growing closer together. The air felt heavier here, thick with a kind of energy I couldn't explain. I stepped carefully over roots and fallen branches, my boots crunching against the mossy ground. And then I saw it. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Through the gaps in the trees ahead, a glimmer of light caught my attention. It wasn't the warm glow of the setting sun, it was something else. Something silvery, almost alive. I hesitated, my heart thudding in my chest. The logical part of me said to turn around, but curiosity was already pulling me forward. The trees parted to reveal a clearing, bathed in an otherworldly light. And there, standing at its center, was a horse. I'd never seen anything like it. Its coat shimmered like liquid silver, catching the light in a way that seemed impossible. Long, flowing mane and tail rippled gently, though there was no breeze. The creature was utterly still, yet its presence filled the clearing, commanding every ounce of my attention. I stepped closer, almost without thinking. My breath caught as its luminous eyes met mine, huge, round, and impossibly deep. They seemed to hold 1,000 secrets, staring straight into me, as if it could see every thought, every doubt, every hope I carried. I stopped a few feet away, unsure of what to do. The horse didn't move, didn't flinch. It simply stood there, watching me. The air around it shimmered faintly like a halo of light. "What are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The horse blinked slowly, and for a moment I could swear it understood me. Something in its gaze shifted. Not just an invitation but a challenge. My feet itched to move forward, but I hesitated, caught between the pull of curiosity and the weight of fear. I wasn't ready. Not yet. But deep down I knew. I'd already started a journey I couldn't turn back from. I stood frozen at the edge of the clearing, my breath caught somewhere between awe and disbelief. The horse was a vision of impossible beauty, its silver coat shimmering like starlight. I'd never seen anything so perfect, so alive. It was as if the forest had conjured it just for me, an answer to a question I hadn't yet asked. I took a cautious step forward, the crunch of twigs beneath my boots loud in the stillness. The horse didn't move, its eyes still locked on mine. There was something in its gaze, a calm intensity, as though it were waiting for me to make the first move. "Hey," I said softly, my voice trembling. I wasn't sure what I expected. Horses didn't answer back. But this wasn't just a horse. I knew that much. Everything about it radiated an otherworldly energy, an aura that made my skin tingle and my heart race. I took another step, then another, until I was only a few feet away. Up close, the horse was even more breathtaking. Its mane rippled like liquid silk, cascading over its neck in waves of silver and pale gold. The faint light that surrounded it seemed to pulse gently, like a heartbeat. I reached out a hand, hesitating for a moment before letting my fingers brush its coat. The fur was impossibly soft, cooler than I expected, and as soon as I touched it, a jolt of energy shot through me. I gasped, pulling my hand back instinctively. The horse's eyes blinked slowly, its gaze steady and unyielding, as if urging me to try again. My heart thudded in my chest as I reached out once more, this time pressing my palm against its side. The sensation was overwhelming, a surge of warmth, light, and something deeper. Something that felt like it was reaching into me, searching for something I wasn't sure I could give. And then I saw it. A faint glow began to form beneath my hand, spreading across the horse's coat like liquid fire. I pulled back in shock, and that's when I noticed it. A thick, silvery liquid dripping from its body, pooling on the ground beneath its hooves. It wasn't blood and it wasn't sweat. It was something else entirely. The air around it shimmered, charged with a strange energy that made my skin prickle. What is this?" I whispered, staring at the glowing substance. It dripped slowly, almost deliberately, as though the horse itself was offering it to me. The horse lowered its head slightly, its luminous eyes never leaving mine. I could feel its silent command, an invitation, a question, a challenge. The liquid at my feet glowed brighter, and the air seemed to hum with anticipation. I knelt down, reaching hesitantly toward the pool of light. My fingers brushed its surface, and the world around me shifted. A wave of warmth and light surged through my body, and for a moment, I couldn't tell where I ended and the forest began. The horse stood over me, silent and still, but its presence was everywhere. In that moment, I understood one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't just a creature. It was a doorway, a guide, and I was meant to follow. The forest around me seemed to vanish as the liquid's warmth surged through my veins. My hand trembled as I pulled it away, but the glow didn't fade. It clung to my skin, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. The air felt heavier, charged with an energy I couldn't explain. I staggered back, my breath quick and shallow, and looked up at the horse. It hadn't moved. Its luminous eyes followed me, steady and unyielding, as though it was waiting to see what I'd do next. My head spun with questions, but no answers came. All I knew was that something profound had just happened, something I couldn't begin to comprehend. I glanced down at my hand. The faint glow lingered there, and for a moment, I thought I could hear whispers, soft, fragmented voices like wind rustling through leaves. They weren't coming from the forest. They were inside me. "What are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The horse stepped forward, its hooves silent against the mossy ground. Its presence filled the clearing, overwhelming yet comforting. The glow on my skin grew brighter, spreading up my arm, and with it came a rush of images. They flashed through my mind too quickly to grasp. Trees older than time, a river of stars, faces I didn't recognize but felt I somehow knew. I stumbled, clutching my head, and sank to my knees. The horse lowered its head, its muzzle brushing against my shoulder. The contact was gentle, grounding, and the flood of images began to slow. One image lingered. A towering tree with roots that stretched deep into the earth, its branches reaching toward the sky. At its base was the orb, glowing softly, waiting. The orb. I didn't know how I knew, but it was important. Vital. It was as if the forest itself was guiding me toward it, and the horse was my bridge between the two worlds. I looked up at the horse again. "Am I supposed to find it?" I asked, though I wasn't expecting an answer. Still, I felt its response, not in words but in a deep, unshakable certainty. Yes. I pushed myself to my feet, my legs shaky beneath me. The glow on my skin faded, but I could still feel its warmth, a tether connecting me to the forest's pulse. The horse turned and began walking, its movements fluid and deliberate. It didn't look back, but I knew it wanted me to follow. The forest shifted as I moved deeper into its depths. The trees grew taller, their branches weaving together to form a canopy that blocked out the light. Shadows danced along the ground, and the air grew colder, heavier with every step. My heart pounded in my chest, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. The pull was too strong. The horse paused at the edge of another clearing, its head tilting slightly as if it was listening to something I couldn't hear. I stepped up beside it, and for a moment we stood in silence, gazing into the misty expanse before us. The orb was out there. I could feel it. But so was something else, something watching, waiting. and as I stepped forward, I realized there was no turning back. The forest grew darker as I moved forward, the air thick with an unspoken tension. The horse walked ahead of me, its silver form cutting through the shadows like a beacon. Each step it took was deliberate, purposeful, and though it made no sound, I felt its presence echo through the ground beneath my feet. The trees around me seemed to shift, their trunks twisting into strange shapes as though they were alive. The path beneath my boots narrowed, disappearing into a tangle of roots and moss. I hesitated, glancing back toward the way I'd come, but the forest had already closed in behind me. There was no going back. A faint glimmer caught my eye through the undergrowth. It wasn't the orb, but something else, faint, almost imperceptible, like the first star in a twilight sky. I pushed through the thick vines, my fingers brushing against their damp leaves, and stepped into a small clearing. The horse had stopped, its luminous eyes fixed on a point just beyond the edge of the clearing. I followed its gaze, my breath catching as I saw what lay ahead. A massive tree towered before me, its gnarled trunk stretching high into the darkened sky. Its roots sprawled across the ground like the fingers of an ancient hand, clutching the earth with a silent, unyielding grip. The bark was covered in intricate patterns, swirling lines and shapes that glowed faintly in the dim light. They reminded me of the liquid I'd touched, the strange energy that had surged through me. "What is this place?" I whispered, though I didn't expect an answer. The horse stepped forward, its hooves brushing against the roots. As it moved, the glowing patterns on the tree began to shift, rearranging themselves into shapes that felt almost familiar. Symbols I couldn't quite recognize but somehow understood. The air grew colder, sharper, and I felt a strange pull toward the tree. It wasn't the same as the orb's call. It was deeper, more visceral, as if the tree itself were alive and aware of my presence. The glow beneath my skin flared faintly, responding to the patterns on the bark, and I took a hesitant step forward. As I approached, the tree seemed to pulse, its energy rippling through the ground. The faint glimmer I'd seen earlier grew brighter, and I realized it wasn't coming from the tree, it was coming from beneath it, the orb. I crouched near the roots, my hands trembling as I reached out to touch the glowing light. But before my fingers could make contact, the ground beneath me shifted. A low, resonant sound filled the clearing, like the groan of a great beast waking from its slumber. I stumbled back, my heart racing. The horse stood still, unbothered, its gaze steady and calm. Didn't move to stop me, nor did it guide me forward. This was my choice, my test. The light from beneath the tree flickered, pulsing in time with my own heartbeat. The air felt charged, alive, as though the forest itself was watching, waiting for me to decide. I took a deep breath, steadying my trembling hands. Whatever lay ahead, I knew this moment would change everything. And then, I stepped closer. The clearing seemed to hold its breath as I stepped closer to the tree. The glow beneath its roots pulsed steadily, as if alive, beckoning me to uncover its secret. I crouched low, my fingers hovering over the light, but just as I was about to touch it, a sharp chill swept through the air, freezing me in place. A shadow moved at the edge of my vision. I stood quickly, my heart pounding as I scanned the clearing. The forest had grown impossibly still, the silence oppressive. The horse stood a few paces away, its silver coat gleaming faintly in the dim light. It didn't seem concerned, but its gaze was fixed on something behind me. I turned slowly, my breath catching in my throat as I saw the figure standing among the trees. It was tall, cloaked in darkness, its form shifting like smoke. Its face was obscured, but I could feel its gaze, piercing, heavy, and utterly inescapable. My first instinct was to run, but my feet felt rooted to the ground, as though the forest itself was holding me in place. The figure stepped forward, its movements fluid and silent. As it approached, the air grew colder, and I felt the weight of its presence pressing down on me. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I thought I might collapse under the force of it. "You've come far," the figure said, its voice low and resonant, echoing through the clearing like a distant thunderclap. "But you must prove you are worthy of the truth you seek." My voice caught in my throat. I wanted to speak, to demand answers, but the words wouldn't come. The figure raised a hand, and the light beneath the tree flared brighter, illuminating the symbols etched into the bark. "You stand at the threshold," the figure continued. "Beyond this point lies the truth. But to cross it, you must face the one thing you fear most. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. Fear. The word hung in the air like a challenge, daring me to confront what I had spent so long avoiding. The forest, the orb, the horse, it had all led to this moment, but now that I was here, I wasn't sure I had the strength to take the final step. What if I'm not ready? I whispered, the words barely audible. The figure tilted its head slightly, the shadows around it shifting like ripples on water. No one is ever ready. That is why you must choose. The glow beneath the tree pulsed again, brighter this time, and the air seemed to hum with energy. I glanced at the horse, hoping for some kind of reassurance, but it stood motionless, its gaze unreadable. The figure stepped aside, gesturing toward the tree. Step forward, it said. Or turn back. The choice is yours. My hands trembled as I looked at the glowing light, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. This was it, the moment I had been led to, the choice that would define everything. The fear in my chest clawed at me, urging me to retreat, but beneath it, a quiet resolve began to grow. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Then, with one final glance at the horse, I stepped forward. The light flared, and the world around me erupted into blinding brilliance. The light was everywhere, enveloping me in its brilliance. For a moment I couldn't tell if my feet were still on the ground, or if I was floating in some vast, endless space. My body felt weightless, and the hum of the glowing orb filled my ears, growing louder, deeper, until it was no longer a sound but a vibration that resonated through my entire being. When the light began to fade, I found myself standing at the base of the tree. The clearing had transformed. The air was warmer now, softer, carrying a faint, floral scent that I didn't recognize. The symbols etched into the bark glowed faintly, shifting and rearranging themselves as though alive. And there, nestled within the roots, was the orb. It pulsed gently, its golden-silver light casting rippling patterns across the ground. My breath caught as I stepped closer, drawn to it as if by an invisible thread. The orb was smaller than I had imagined, about the size of a large apple, but it radiated an energy that felt infinite. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and paused just short of touching it. "Do you see now?" a voice said behind me. I turned sharply, my heart leaping into my throat. The figure was there again, standing just at the edge of the light. Its form was clearer now, the shadows less opaque. Though its face remained obscured, I could see its eyes, glimmering silver, the same as the horse's. "This is the heart of the forest," it continued, its voice low but steady. "Everything flows from here. The roots beneath your feet, the air you breathe, the ground you walk. It all comes from the orb." I glanced at the orb again, its light mesmerizing. "What does it want from me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure tilted its head slightly. "It doesn't want. Simply is. It is truth, and truth does not ask. It reveals." A shiver ran through me, though the air was warm. "And if I touch it?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "If you touch it," the figure said, stepping closer, "you will see everything. The answers you seek, the fears you carry, the doubts you've buried, they will all be laid bare. Nothing will be hidden from you." The weight of its words settled heavily on my chest. I thought of the images I'd seen before, the flashes of light, the faces, the swirling stars. I thought of the horse, its calm presence and steady gaze. Everything had led me here. But now that I was standing at the edge of the truth, I wasn't sure I wanted to face it. "And if I don't?" I asked. The figure's voice softened. "Then the forest will let you go. It will close itself to you, and you will carry your questions with you for the rest of your life." I stared at the orb, the light dancing across my face. The pull was undeniable. But so was the fear of what I might find if I stepped forward. My doubts screamed at me to turn away, to leave this place and never look back. But beneath that fear, a quiet voice whispered a different truth. I had come this far. I couldn't leave now. I took a deep breath, steadying my trembling hands, and reached for the orb. As my fingers brushed the surface of the orb, the world around me shattered into a kaleidoscope of light and sound. I staggered back, but there was nowhere to go. The clearing dissolved, replaced by an endless expanse of shifting colors and shadows that pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. The orb was gone, or perhaps I was inside it, I couldn't tell anymore. The air vibrated with whispers, faint and fragmented, growing louder with every passing moment. I tried to focus, but the voices swirled around me, too many to comprehend. And then, as suddenly as it began, the chaos stilled. The colors faded to black, and I was left standing in the center of an infinite void. "You are not ready," a voice said, piercing the silence. It wasn't the figure from before. It was my own voice, but colder, sharper, as though spoken by a stranger. I turned toward the sound, my chest tightening as I saw the shadows begin to coalesce. A figure stepped forward from the darkness, its form identical to mine. It had my face, my eyes, but its expression was hard, unyielding. Its gaze pinned me in place, and I felt my breath hitch. "What are you?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The shadow me tilted its head, a cruel smile tugging at the corners of its lips. "I am everything you refused to see. Every doubt, every fear, every truth you bury deep inside. I am the part of you that you run from." I took a step back, my pulse racing. "You're lying." "Am I?" it asked, stepping closer. Its movements were fluid, deliberate, like a predator stalking prey. "You've spent your entire life pretending you're in control, pretending you can find answers if you just look hard enough. But the truth terrifies you, doesn't it?" I clenched my fists, the warmth of the orb still lingering on my skin. "I came here to find the truth. And now you have." The shadow's voice was almost a whisper, its eyes narrowing. "But you don't want it. Not really. You want comfort, validation, something to make you feel whole. The truth won't give you that. The truth will break you." I shook my head, trying to block out its words, but they burrowed deep, cutting through the fragile defenses I'd built around myself. "You're wrong," I said, though my voice wavered. "I can handle this." The shadow stopped, its smile fading. "Then prove it." The void around us shifted, and suddenly, I was surrounded by flashes of memories. Moments I had long tried to forget. Failures, rejections, fears I'd pushed aside. The whispers returned, louder now, each one dragging me further into the depths of my own mind. Tears blurred my vision, and I sank to my knees, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. The shadow stood over me, its presence suffocating. "You can leave," it said softly. "Walk away, and you'll never have to face this again." I looked up, the defiance in my chest flickering like a dying flame. But as I met its gaze, I remembered the horse, its calm eyes and steady presence. I remembered the figure's words. "The truth doesn't ask. It reveals." Taking a shaky breath, I forced myself to stand. "No," I said, my voice steady despite the fear. "I won't run. Not anymore." The shadow regarded me for a long moment, and then, for the first time, it smiled, not cruelly but almost approvingly. The void began to dissolve, and the whispers faded into silence. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the clearing. The orb glowed faintly at my feet, and the horse stood nearby, watching me with its serene gaze. I had faced the shadows, and though I didn't have all the answers, I knew one thing for certain. I was ready for whatever came next. The clearing was quiet, but the stillness no longer felt oppressive. The orb's glow had softened, its pulsing light steady and calm, as if reflecting the shift within me. I knelt beside it, my hands brushing the moss-covered roots of the great tree. The forest felt alive in a way I hadn't noticed before. Every rustle of leaves, every faint breeze carried meaning, as though the air itself was breathing with me. I reached out tentatively, my fingertips grazing the orb. This time there was no blinding light, no overwhelming rush of energy. Instead, the world around me seemed to ripple, and I found myself standing in a place both familiar and foreign. The clearing was the same, but it wasn't. The trees were younger, their branches less gnarled. The air was clearer, and the forest felt lighter, as though I had stepped back in time. In the distance, I saw movement, figures standing together near the base of the great tree. I moved closer, my steps slow and deliberate, unsure of what I was walking into. As I approached, the figures became clearer. A man and a woman, their faces etched with worry. The woman's hair was long and dark, and her eyes glistened with tears. The man had a scar cutting across his cheek, his expression hardened with resolve. They spoke in hushed tones, their words indistinct, but their emotions were unmistakable. The weight of their conversation pressed on the air, and I felt as though I were intruding on something sacred. I wanted to turn away to give them privacy, but my feet wouldn't move. Suddenly, the woman turned, her eyes locking onto mine. My breath caught in my throat. There was a flicker of recognition in her gaze, as if she knew me, as if she had been waiting for me. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Instead, the scene around us began to dissolve, fading into the shimmering light of the orb. "No!" cried, reaching out toward her. But she was gone, her figure vanishing like mist in the morning sun. The forest reformed around me, returning to the present, but the weight of what I had seen lingered. I sat back, my heart racing, trying to make sense of it. Who were they? And why did it feel like I had been a part of their story? The horse stepped forward, its silver coat glinting in the faint light. It lowered its head, its gaze steady and calm as though reassuring me. "They were here, weren't they?" I whispered. The horse didn't respond, it never did, but its presence was answer enough. The orb pulsed faintly, drawing my attention once more. The images I had seen weren't just memories, they were echoes, fragments of something larger. I felt a strange pull, an urgency to understand but also a growing fear. The past was connected to this place, to the orb, and somehow to me. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. The truth was closer now, almost within reach. But as I looked at the orb, glowing softly at the base of the ancient tree, I couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest part was yet to come. The air in the clearing felt heavier now, as though the forest was pressing in on me. The orb's glow pulsed steadily, a rhythm that echoed in my chest. My breathing slowed, matching its cadence. But my mind raced. The visions of the past, the woman's eyes, the man's stoic resolve, lingered in my thoughts. I didn't know who they were or why their presence felt so familiar, but I knew they were connected to the choice I had to make. The horse stood silently nearby, its silver coat gleaming faintly in the dim light. Its calm gaze steadied me, though it offered no answers. I turned back to the orb, my hands trembling as I reached for it again. Before I could touch it, a shadow fell over me. "You've seen enough," a voice said, low and resonant. I froze. The shadowy figure from before had returned, its form more defined now. Its shape mirrored mine, but its presence was cold, sharp, the edges of its being blurred into the mist, but its silver eyes glowed with an intensity that made me shiver. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely steady. The figure tilted its head, studying me. "This is not about what I want," it said. "It is about what you are willing to give. The orb holds truth, but truth comes at a cost." I swallowed hard, my pulse quickening. "What cost?" The figure stepped closer, and the air grew colder. "The truth will shatter the illusions you cling to. It will strip you bare, leave you exposed. The person you think you are will not survive it." Its words cut deep, and a part of me wanted to step back, to walk away. But another part of me, the part that had brought me this far, held firm. "And if I walk away?" I asked. "Then you will carry your questions with you for the rest of your days," it said. "You will never know what lies beyond this moment." I clenched my fists, my gaze shifting to the orb. The pull was stronger now, but so was the fear. The figure was right, deep down I wasn't sure I wanted the truth. What if it broke me? What if I couldn't handle what I found? The horse shifted slightly, drawing my attention. Its eyes met mine, and in their calm depths I found a flicker of strength. The fear didn't disappear, but it no longer felt insurmountable. The forest, the orb, the horse, they had all led me here. I couldn't walk away now. I turned back to the shadowy figure. "I'm not afraid," I said, though my voice wavered slightly. "I want to know the truth." The figure's expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. "Then step forward," it said, its voice softening, "and let the truth find you." I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. Then with trembling hands I reached for the orb. As my fingers closed around its surface, the world erupted into light. The light enveloped me, consuming everything in its brilliance. My breath caught, and for a moment I was suspended in nothingness. There was no forest, no horse, no ground beneath my feet, only the overwhelming radiance of the orb. It pulsed with a rhythm that felt ancient, alive, and I couldn't tell if it was a part of me or if I was becoming a part of it. The whispers began softly, growing louder with every pulse. They were fragmented at first, disjointed echoes that seemed to swirl around me. But as the light steadied, so did the voices. They weren't random. They were mine. I saw flashes of my life, moments I had buried deep, memories I didn't want to face. The time I failed to stand up for myself. The words I didn't say when they mattered most. The people I had hurt and the ones who had hurt me. Each memory hit me like a wave, raw and unfiltered, until I thought I might drown in them. "You are your own prison," a voice said, low and resonant. It wasn't coming from outside, it was inside me, a part of me. "You cling to fear and call it control. You bury your doubts and call it strength. But the truth cannot be hidden forever." I wanted to deny it, to fight back, but the orb showed me more. The faces of the man and the woman appeared again. Clearer now. Their emotions burned through me. His resolve, her sorrow. And I realized they weren't strangers. They were reflections. Pieces of me that I had ignored or forgotten. "What am I supposed to do?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The light pulsed again, softer this time, and the voices quieted. In their place I felt a presence, calm, steady. Like the forest itself was cradling me. The images slowed, coalescing into a single vision. The horse standing in the clearing, its luminous eyes fixed on me. The truth hit me like a jolt. The horse wasn't just a guide. It wasn't leading me to answers. It was showing me that I already had them. The orb, the forest, the visions, they weren't giving me something new. They were peeling back the layers, revealing what had been there all along. "You carry the truth within you," the voice said, softer now. "The answers you seek are not in the forest. They are in you." I closed my eyes, the weight of the revelation pressing against my chest. I had spent so much of my life searching for meaning, for clarity, thinking I had to find it outside myself. But it had always been here, waiting for me to see it. The light around me began to dim, and I felt the ground beneath my feet again. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the clearing. The orb rested in my hands, its glow steady and warm. The horse stood nearby, its calm gaze meeting mine. I took a deep breath, letting the truth settle. The fear hadn't disappeared, but it no longer controlled me. The forest hadn't changed, but I had. The clearing was quiet now, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm. The orb rested in my hands, its light steady and calm, as though it too was waiting for my next move. The horse stood a few feet away, its silver coat glinting faintly in the dim light. Its presence was reassuring, a silent reminder that I wasn't alone. But the choice was mine alone to make. I stared at the orb, its warmth seeping into my skin. Everything it had shown me, everything I had experienced in the forest, had led to this moment. The truth wasn't something to be found, it was something to be accepted. And now I had to decide what to do with it. The shadowy figure appeared at the edge of the clearing, its form more solid now. It stepped closer, its movements fluid and deliberate. When it stopped, it stood directly across from me, its silver eyes reflecting the orb's light. "You've seen the truth," it said, its voice softer than before. "You know what lies within you. But truth alone is not enough. What will you do with it?" I tightened my grip on the orb, its weight grounding me. "I don't know," I admitted. My voice was steady but my heart raced. "But I can't turn back. Not now." The figure inclined its head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement. "The path forward will not be easy," it said. "The truth demands much, but it gives much in return. Are you willing to bear that weight?" I glanced at the horse, its calm gaze meeting mine. Didn't move, but I felt its presence like a steady heartbeat, reminding me of the strength I had found within myself. The forest had tested me, pushed me to my limits, but it had also shown me that I was capable of more than I had ever believed. "Yes," I said finally, my voice firm. "I'm ready." The figure nodded, and the orb in my hands began to glow brighter, its light spilling across the clearing. The warmth spread through me, filling every corner of my being, and I felt a strange sense of peace, a quiet certainty that I had made the right choice. The figure stepped back, its form dissolving into the mist, leaving me alone with the horse and the orb. The light grew softer, fading slowly until the orb was no more than a faint shimmer in my palms. I looked down and my hands were empty. The horse stepped forward then, its silver eyes full of quiet understanding. It lowered its head, nudging my shoulder gently, and I smiled for the first time since entering the forest. I didn't have all the answers, not yet, but I didn't need them. I had everything I needed to move forward. The horse turned, walking toward the edge of the clearing. I hesitated for a moment, watching it disappear into the mist, and then I followed. The path ahead was unknown, but for the first time I didn't feel afraid. I had faced the truth, and I was ready for whatever came next.